Hi, welcome to episode 2 with me, Robert Gurr, and Stephen, my son. Are you ready for another mind blowing episode, Stephen?
I am ready to do something that makes us learn a little bit. I mean, just today I had the opportunity to, get a little bit of Panda Express for dinner. And one of the ones I had in my cookie was there's much to be learned by listening to others. So today I'm going to have to be learning and listening. We will be going
That
over understanding the Trinity and why it fails.
that is a timely fortune cookie. Yes. Yeah. So
Coincidence.
tell me, just uh, this is coming out of the blue, but when you hear the word Trinity and you know nothing about like what Christians believe or the Trinitarians believe about the Trinity, so tell me what you think about the Trinity. How would you describe the Trinity?
From what I've heard, right?
Hmm.
Okay. That there are three separate entities that exist as one entity.
Okay.
There are three personalities that all have different goals and aims, but they're all the same person. And that they all can exist in one form or another. And I don't know, it starts to get a little lost on me from there.
Yeah, that is completely fine. I wanted to find out what you thought because a lot of people have a lot of misunderstandings about the Trinity, and
Mm,
they think that the Trinity it's first of all nobody can explain it. So you're not by any means you are not alone in trying to explain a concept that is not understandable. And we'll clarify and hit on some of the things that you talked about. So Trinitarians generally believe that the Trinity are three persons in the same being or the same God, three persons in the same God, and
yeah.
they use those words very specifically. They use the word person and being very specifically because when I think of a person,
Yeah, I look
a
at
person
you,
to
look
me
at
is
me, you look at, anyone else. That's a
you
person.
are a being, right?
Yeah.
You are a
I'm my
being.
own separate being.
And so when we hear, three persons in the same being, it's just like, wait, what? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Um, so we will go through where that came from, the history behind it, and uh, it is going to blow your mind because uh, we will start um, with. Remember, so last week we talked about Anaxagoras, and
Yeah.
Anaxagoras
Greek
was,
philosopher.
yeah, he's a Greek philosopher. He lived in the 400 BC time frame, and Martin Luther quoted him. Martin Luther was like he respected this man, and he quoted him. If you remember from the last week's episode, um, it was in one of the Martin Luther used a philosophy, or he he sourced the philosophers, the Greek philosophers, for his theology. And
Yeah.
Anaxagoras was one of the ones that he was impressed with and that he liked. So we're going to start with what did Anaxagoras actually believe? What did he do? If you remember from last week, he talked about how the the nous mind, um,
The overarching knows everything and
overarching.
controls everything.
Yes, exactly. So we have this uh, uh, being or this mind up there that does not have any parts uh, or passions, and it's just basically this nebulous thing that can control or control our world. And if you were to compare that, or actually we did talk about this a little bit. So if you were to compare that,
Yeah.
we're basically talking about a programmer outside time and space making a virtual world, making the matrix,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. It's you're basically saying, this nebulous noose mind up there. He's forming matter, you know, zeros and ones into a universe where we exist and where we perceive all things. We perceive, you know, what we think is matter,
Mm-hmm.
and he controls everything. And so we are nothing more than basically NPCs, non-player characters in this matrix world of his that he created. Right? I
Yeah.
mean, I
Which,
think that's why
yeah.
the Matrix was so well received, is because it's based on actual Greek philosophy. It came from this guy named Anaxagoras. So, what do you think of him so far? What?
I think he probably came up with this idea when he was drunk.
It's pretty
Listen,
crazy.
Greeks got drunk. Philosophers, no exception. And I think he just had this great idea, and people were like, yes,
Hmm.
well, we'll think about that because we're a democracy.
Yeah. So why don't you read some of the things? So these are the Christians and what the Christians wrote. They were very familiar with the Greek philosophers at the time, and they were trying to stamp out the heresies in the Greek philosophers as they started to enter into the church. And
Mm-hmm.
um, some of these leaders, they started going off and they started to teach Greek philosophy.
Okay.
One was um, uh, Saint Augustine, who was a Manichaean. We talked about this last week. How he brought his Gnostic heresies into the church
Yeah.
with original sin.
Okay.
So that's an example.
Yeah.
So go ahead and read these two statements up here about what Anaxagoras taught.
The first cause of the universe was not previously known to the Greeks, neither accordingly to Thales, who came to the conclusion that water was the first cause, nor to the other natural philosophers who succeeded him, since it was Anaxagoras who was the first who assigned to nous mind the supremacy over material things. This person
Yeah,
affirmed the original.
go ahead.
This person affirmed the originating principle of the universe to be mind and matter, mind being the efficient cause, whereas matter that which was being formed.
So Anaxagoras created this idea, this theory. So he's not the first philosopher. In fact, he's several hundred years later, but he's before Socrates, he's before Plato, he's before some of the more well-known Greek philosophers that we think about.
Mm-hmm.
So Thales is kind of considered the father of Greek philosophy, and he taught that everything came from water, from uh, this idea that the water was the first cause. Um, doesn't actually explain what caused the water,
Yeah.
but that's where we're getting it. So he's coming. So he's got this idea that water was the first cause. And Anaxagoras says no, mind was the first cause. This nous abstract concept of the mind was the first cause, and he caused all matter to form, and he has all control over the matter. And because of that, it's basically he has foreordained and fated everything to happen that is going to be done with that matter.
Okay.
And so everything is fated from the beginning, because of this nous mind.
All right.
So this was what the actual teachings of the early Christian church taught, though. They didn't believe that matter was created. They didn't believe it. It's called ex nihilo. Ex nihilo means creating something out of nothing. So from the very beginning, we have actually the first Christians didn't believe that, and we have a couple of quotes from the earliest Christians, the earliest church fathers, and we were introduced to them last week as well. So these earliest church fathers said what? What did Justin Martyr say?
And we have been taught that he in the beginning did of his goodness, for man's sake, create all things out of unformed matter, And if men by their works show themselves worthy of this design, his design, they are deemed worthy, and so we have received, of reigning in company with him. Create
Okay,
all
so
things out of unformed matter.
unformed matter. So we have this very first idea that Justin Martyr was teaching. He was a church father in the about 150 A.D. So 50 years after John died. I mean, just 50 years. And then we have Origen. What does Origen say?
In that book, The Wisdom of Solomon, we find written as follows: For your almighty hand that made the world out of shapeless matter. Very many, indeed, are of opinion that the matter of which things are made of is itself signified in the language used by Moses in the beginning of Genesis. In the beginning, God made heaven and earth, and the earth was invisible and not arranged. For by the words invisible and not arranged, Moses would seem to mean nothing else than shapeless matter.
All right. So we have this is Origen. Now, Origen actually did believe in ex nihilo. Okay. He did believe that God created everything out of nothing. Uh, but he also says that a great many of us, and he says that, in other areas that he writes, he says, fellow Christians believe that that God just arranged matter, preformed matter,
Okay.
that matter and God existed um, simultaneously throughout the eternities.
So
So it
this
was
changed. So Origin believed in it. Justin Martyr didn't.
Justin Martyr believed in he believed pre-existing matter. Origen believed that matter was created, but we're getting this idea from Anaxagoras, right?
Okay.
We see that because when we go to the next slide, we actually um, the Jews. This is what the Jews believed. The Jews believed that matter. Thales says it came from chaos. I mean, it came from water, right?
Yeah.
Well, the Jews believed that water was another term for chaos, and so you could not find a Jew at the time that did not believe that that God and matter existed simultaneously, and that God formed the world out of uncreated matter, and He arranged it. He arranged it out of what is called chaos. And
Okay.
as we read through this statement here, I don't need to read it word for word, but so chaos was this malevolent force,
Hmm.
and uh, we think of it as nothing, but it was to the Jews it was a malevolent force, and that God overcame this chaos, and it was the highest form of conquering. I mean, to conquer chaos, you couldn't get any better than that, because we think that uh, he says that they feared that God created the earth out of a trash heap, basically, and he lives on a something that was a trash heap. But no, it
Ugh,
was
no.
bigger than that.
And
It
it
was
doesn't
bigger. It
make
was not.
sense either to call it trash, to call it chaos. No.
Yeah.
If God existed in that kind of a state, that's against what as spoken of as God, as being a God of order, a God of, beautiful things. And this is not what God is. And if he always was, that wouldn't make any sense.
hmm Now, there's an excellent video for if you want anybody out there wants to go and research this a little further. Dr. Michael Heiser is a Old Testament scholar, and he's got a video out there called. Let's see if I can remember it. It's
How do you spell
God
his
and the
name?
Sea, God and the Sea Monsters.
God of the sea
Search for
monster.
that. God and the Sea Monsters by Michael Heiser, and it talks about how water represented chaos and how God overcame the sea demons, the sea monsters, and He organized um, organized the world out of unformed matter. Now, this is all kind of important because Anaxagoras, uh, we start to see how this idea of God, where He came from, and matter, where it came from, how
Hmm.
this affects the Trinity. We'll start to see that when we start to read Parmenides. So Parmenides was actually before Anaxagoras. All right. And
Yeah,
Parmenides,
475 BC.
475. So he was about 50 years before Anaxagoras was really at his prime. And Parmenides had a different take on the order of the universe. And so, what does Parmenides say?
For Parmenides likewise supposes the universe to be one, both eternal and unbegotten, and of a spherical form. Very much, since unborn and indestructible he is, whole, only begotten, and immovable, and unoriginated. For thinking and being, ousia, are the same.
So, Parmenides was the first person to come up with the term ousia, or to describe it in the idea of the formation of the universe. Now, he thought that the mind and that the particles or the matter were kind of the same thing, and that all matter had intelligence, that all matter had this mind, and so we were all part of this matter mind thing, and that we all had that all matter kind of has the ability to think and reason, and that it kind of self-created. All right, so
Yeah.
Parmenides had kind of this idea, um, but he says, for thinking and being are the same thing. Well, it was about 500 years ago, 400 years ago, that Rene Descartes came up with a saying that you may have heard: "Cogito ergo sum."
Nope, I haven't heard
Cogito
that before.
ergo sum.
Or maybe I've heard it in English, but
I
that's
think
Latin. Oh, wait.
that is Latin.
Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Yeah,
There you
I
go.
heard
I
it in
think,
English.
therefore I am. And that's a very powerful statement that he got basically from Parmenides. Parmenides was this idea that the mind is the being, and that the mind and the being has form and shape and matter, and
Mhm.
this that we're made of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so it was Anaxagoras that said, no, 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 the mind isn't made of stuff. The mind is higher than the stuff. And so it's up here and the stuff is down here, and that the mind has control of the stuff down here. So we start to see this. Now it's time for a grammar lesson, because, we grammar is universal in all languages. It's universal in Greek, Hebrew, English, Spanish, Latin, anything that you want to think about. Grammar is what identifies how we can picture things. Now, as we start to go through these, it's important we understand grammar, because we need to understand the grammar of the Trinity. So, when we think of nouns, there's several different types of nouns, and there's actually more than these, but I
Yeah.
use these because these are kind of the important ones. So, the first kind of nouns that we have are count nouns. They're things that we can count. They go in singular and plural. So we can count houses, right? We can count one house, two house, three houses, four houses, five houses, right? One computer, two computers, three computers, four computers. And so we can do that for count nouns. Count nouns give you the ability to count.
Yeah,
Mass nouns,
they modify them.
mass nouns are a little different. Mass nouns, you can't count. So if I were to say, one music, two musics, three musics,
Nope, doesn't
that
work.
that that doesn't work, right? It's like, wait a minute, something sounds wrong here. One gold, two golds, three golds. We don't, that just doesn't sound right to our ears. And this is true in any language, right? I mean, if we were to change this to Greek or whatever, Spanish, there's these nouns that we think of that are kind of, music is this large thing in our brain that says we can hear notes, and we can hear beats and harmony and all these things, and so we kind of understand music to be this concept. So music needs a quantifier, and um, when we think of quantifiers, we think of, so a sheet of music would be a quantifier. Sheet of music. It quantifies that that nebulous thing in our brain that says what music is. We need to quantify it by, simplifying it down to a sheet of music, or a song of music, or a note of music, or something, right?
Or another counted noun, which
It's another
defines
counted noun.
a
That's
mass
right.
noun.
You're getting it. So what do you think might gold? What would quantify gold?
Colors, or like other adjectives, or how much gold you have by
How
like
much?
a crate of gold.
A crate of gold, a gold coin, a bar of gold, a
Yeah,
shipload of gold, a truckload of gold. So
a dragon's hoard worth of gold.
oh yes, that sounds awesome. So we can quantify gold by giving it these quantifiers.
Yes.
Um, a cup of flour, a glass of milk, money. You can't count money. You don't say one money's, two money's, three money's, right? You have quantifiers by saying, okay, I've got a certain number of dollars. You can't quantify air. You can't say airs. It just doesn't work. One air, two air, three. You can't count them. So those are
Yeah.
called mass nouns. Now, this is important because this nous mind that Anaxagoras was talking about is a mass noun, right?
Yeah.
So this you can't count really when you're thinking of the mind. Uh, it's this overarching nebulous thing that there's only one mind, one. Uh, you don't necessarily say one noose, two nooses, three nooses in Greek. It just doesn't work.
Yep.
All right. So the third noun that we come across is a collective noun. And a collective noun can be both singular and plural, just like count nouns. You can count them. But they aren't just singular it's not just a singular being.
No, this
You
is
have
multiple entities
you have
involved in this
multiple
kind of noun.
entities within that collective. So
Group, team, government, corporation, family. All of these involve multiple people, not just that person,
that's right.
or that entity's description and what they would do. So a corporation, obviously, that's a company's. This is our thing. This is what we do, and all of us, and it says all of us are in this together. Or the
That,
government, all of us are for the people, or our
that's
our
right.
team, our group, anything. All of that is a number of people being described of with this noun, and you can say multiples of those. There are multiple governments in the world. There are multiple
Mhm.
corporations, and hopefully they're all working on the same team.
Yeah, co-opetition, right? Yeah, if
Yeah.
only. That's called a monopoly, right?
We're all on the same
when
human team.
yeah. So so what we see is there's different ways of viewing um, certain nouns. We
Hmm.
can view God as a mass noun, which is what what Trinitarians do, is they view him as this nebulous being who is overarching above up here, like the nous mind is from Anaxagoras.
Yeah.
But the early Christian church viewed him as a government, as a team, a unity where you have one single group that they were together,
So a
and that's how
collective
they.
noun.
Yes, as a collective noun.
God was a collective noun.
He was a collective noun. That's right. So we can start to see how language and how we start to change our perception of these things. So if we go to the next slide, the next thing we need to learn is participles. Now, participles, when we talk about a verb, um, it changes the verb into a noun. And what that does, so we have verb forms. We have run, swim, jump, and even to be. To be is a verb. Um, when we change those into a present participle, we actually add, in English, we just add ing. So with
Running, swimming,
running,
just
swimming,
keep
jumping,
swimming.
and being.
Mhm.
Being is a present participle. It's the present participle of to be.
Yes.
And the word form actually changes in English to past participles where I ran, I swam, I jumped, I've been. Uh, so we have these present participles and past participles. Can you think of any other verb forms and participles that come to mind?
I'm only looking at what I saw there. That's where my brain was. So hold on.
Okay,
Present participles, past participles. Let me
think
think
of
of
a
more
verb.
verbs. Flying,
Whoa, lying,
drawing,
drawing.
painting.
So those are the things that we're doing presently. If you are painting, that means that you are in present tense. You are doing something in the here and now. Being is you are being in the present. Uh, you are existing. Existing is a present participle. We have exist, existing, live, living. These are all present participles.
I am
So
alive.
yeah. So what happens? These are universal in any language, right? It tells
Mhm.
you what you're doing presently, what you've done in the past, and it's an action or it's a verb. Okay. So we have these same participles in Greek, and we can go over these. And the participles of to be or I am, when we talk about the verb itself, the verb is to be, right? I am, I
Mhm.
exist. That's the verb. The verb form in Greek is imi,
I mean,
E-I-M-I. So it's imi. In Latin, it's S, E-S-S-E. In Hebrew, it is Haya, and we see this in the Bible. It's used quite commonly in the Bible. In fact, what I'm going to do is let's take a look at some of these. Um, when we look at IME, this is I go to Bible Hub, and they have a great Hebrew lexicon, so we can see that IME means to I exist, I am. It comes from being to be. All right. So
Mhm.
when we go back to the present participles, they actually change word forms, just like ran, and ran is different from run. It's the same word, but it's a different word form. So it
Right.
changes the language. So the present participle of being um, in Greek is ousia.
Usia.
Now that's the exact same word that Parmenides said.
Yes.
Thinking and being, thinking
Being.
and ousia are the same thing. In Latin, we see that the participle of to be is essentia.
Very close to the word of essential, which is
It
quite
is.
interesting that the Latin language would place one's being as being essential. So,
That's right.
yeah, it is essentia. Hmm. That's very, very interesting.
It is. So we start to see where these words come from. So essential, essence. Essence comes from essentia. It comes from Latin meaning to be, or being. Essentia means to be. Um, Now, if we switch over here to a noun, so these are to be is a verb, right?
Yes.
The noun now is a foundational reality or existence. Existence really is, well, existence is a noun, but in English, they've translated that into person, substance. It comes from the Greek hypostasis or hypostases. Hypostases it actually means foundational reality.
Which, if I'm looking ahead just straight here, foundational reality, substantia in Latin, or this hypostases in Greek. So all that is substantial, all existence, because this is where we get the word substantial from, and
It
obviously
is.
substance. That reality, as we're circling around and around and around on this, that these words just really hit home on. They're trying to define all existence as being this mind. There is no other existence. There is only this existence.
That is true. So let's go back to the Bible. Uh, this is what's in the Bible, and we can see. So, "ime" means it means to be. It's the verb form to be, and it's used in the Bible. It is used 2,479 times in the New Testament alone, because the New Testament is Greek. Okay, so this is a Greek word. It's found 2,500 times in the Bible alone, or in the New Testament alone.
Ime. That
"Ime."
many times. I am.
Now, what they do is they also include different word forms. If you see right here, the Greek language says usa, usia, usan, uh, use, uses, usin, and uson. Guess what is missing here? You don't have to guess too hard. Usia
Usia?
is missing. They didn't include usia along with ime. They included all the other word forms here, but what they did was they actually took it and they parsed it out into its own definition.
Okay.
This is how they are hiding things. This is how that they take words that are common words and they try to make it this mystery. Like, oh, we don't know what usia means. We know exactly what usia means because it's a participle. It is the from usa. It is the feminine present participle, the feminine present participle of ime. It's right here, but you have to go looking for it. So usia is
Wow.
in the New Testament
The Greek.
2,500 times in different forms.
Wait.
Right?
Wait. There's two occurrences of usia, right?
Right. But
From that page, but it is not included on this page, which is Ime's own page in the Greek version of the Bible.
so what they did was they tried to take it out and tried to say that usia is something different than ime. It's not. It is the same word just as much as run and running and ran. It's the same word form. Usia is the same word form as ime and usa and all these other different word forms that we went through here. So there's all these different word forms here of ime.
So when they were translating it from Hebrew into Greek, that's what they were doing.
They were written in Greek. The New Testament was written in Greek. Right?
Right.
So this isn't a translation. This is actually
what they wrote it as.
What they wrote it as. And they tried to parse it out and they tried to separate usia to make it seem like, oh, it's it wasn't really this. It's not this term that you can understand very easily. No, Parmenides was the first one to use it. We know what usia means. It is the feminine participle, present participle of ime. It's the same word, just a different word form.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if we go to, we remember, if we go back to the
Hebrew version,
the Hebrew
haya
verb is haya, right?
Yeah.
So we have haya. Now haya is what came when God said to Moses, and if you remember in Hebrew, you have to kind of read it backwards. So you start over here at verse 14. You start on the right hand side and you read to the left, right? So
Right.
you go right to left, and it said, and said God to Moses, I am Haya. I am that I Haya. I am that I am. And that you should say unto the sons of Israel, Haya has sent me to you. Now, Haya is the same word form as Yahweh. Now, Yahweh is like the proper word that we use for God in the Old Testament. This is Hebrew. This isn't Greek, but this is Hebrew.
Yeah.
And Haya is the same word form as Aimi. It's the same word for. It's the same word as I am. As being, right? As to be. So Jehovah is where we get um, from Yahweh. Yahweh translates into English as Jehovah. In fact, you can see the phonetic spelling here, Yehovah. So we have Jehovah, or Jehovah, is what we have in the Old Testament, and it literally means, I am, I exist, I am being, I'm living, and so all of these words mean the same thing, whether it's Hebrew, Greek, Latin. Latin is essentia. Um, if we went there, so we have, this is where Jehovah comes from. Is from when God spoke to Moses in Exodus 3:14 and said, "I am that I am." Now,
I
if we
am
go
that
to
I am.
I am that I am. Now, if we go to John 8:58, said to them Jesus, "Truly, truly I say to you, before Abraham was, ego eimi, I am, ego eimi." So Aimi and Yahweh, or Yahweh, Jehovah, Haya, they're all the same word. And so this is saying that he was that God who appeared to Moses. Now, what's interesting is if we go back to Exodus 3:2.
Okay.
Now, who appeared? This is interesting because and appeared the angel of Yahweh. Angel of Yahweh appeared. So this is only 12 verses earlier, 12 verses from that. And so the angel of the Lord, the angel of Yahweh appeared, who is
Okay. Yeah.
called the angel of Yahweh, and he's also called Yahweh. So what we have here, we actually have two Yahwehs in heaven. We have then Yahweh rained on Sodom and Gomorrah fire and brimstone from Yahweh out of the heavens. We have two Yahwehs in heaven, two I ams. We have the one who spoke to Moses. He was the messenger of Yahweh, the angel of Yahweh. Angel meant messenger back then, right?
Yeah.
So we have this connection here. Now, this is interesting because these Yahwehs, these I ams, they'd have to have their own minds,
Because they're acting individually.
they're acting individually. They have their own being, right? That's what Aimi means. That's what that Haya means. They have their own being. We have two beings in heaven, two divine beings. Now, if we go a little further, we talked a little bit about hypostasis. Here's hypostasis in the Greek, right? So hypostasis means a support, substance, steadiness, hence assurance. It meant, if you look at the help down here, it says it's a hypostasis is under to stand. It's the foundational thing that we stand on. It's the
foundation.
Foundational reality, right? That's what it meant back then. It meant that this foundational reality, and it's mentioned in the Bible. It's used in the Bible 5 times. Okay? 5 occurrences in the Bible. Hypostasis.
Okay.
In Hebrews 1:3,
All right.
we have talks about Jesus Christ, and it says, who being the radiance of his glory, of God's glory, and the exact expression of the hypostasis of him. So the hypostasis of the Father. Character, if you look at the Greek
Yeah,
character right here,
character,
it means basically
occurrence.
it's used this one time. It means like a stamp, like a statue, like the exact, like if you take a picture of somebody, the picture isn't the same thing as the person, right? It's an exact representation of the person. So character means that he is an exact duplicate, an exact representative of the person or of the hypostasis. And in order to do that, you can't be the same hypostasis, right?
Yeah. If it's even just saying that if he's in, because it describes, Christ as being in the likeness of his Father,
Mm-hmm.
so he would have the same character
That's
according
right.
to what's written there.
He would have the same character. He is in the
The
exact
exact
same
expression
character, exact expression of
of the
the
substance of him.
Father's hypostasis. So the Father's hypostasis, the foundational reality of what the Father is, the Son is the representation of that, right?
Yes. The exact expression, according to what the knowledge is, and the grammar would say in Greek.
That's right. So we're starting to understand the difference between being, ousia, and hypostasis. And in
And where
Latin,
they started to diverge on that thought is like, wait a second, huh? Why are they the same? But they
we
can't be
start
the
to see
same.
this. Yes. So this
How
is
do
the
we
Latin
verify
version.
this?
This is the Latin translation of the Greek of Hebrews 1:3 we just read, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Hebrews 1:3. Here we have the Latin translation. What did they translate hypostasis as?
Substantiating. Or wait, it's a
Substantia.
little bit substantia. There we go.
Yep.
When you highlighted it, okay, that's a combination character. Okay,
It
AE.
is. It's an A and an E there. Yeah. So it's a
Substantiate.
little. So substantiate. So we see that substantia was the translation of hypostasis. Essentia was the translation of what? Essentia was the
Uh,
translation of what?
Imi?
Imi or ousia.
Usia. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Now this is where it gets fun.
We're uh, melting here. It's a lot of
Mind
new
blown yet?
words. Well, I mean, like you
Okay.
mind blew me before with this, but hearing
But
it
we
again
start.
and is
Yeah, we
pretty
start
good.
to see where these words are coming from and how they're being used today incorrectly.
Yes.
All right. This is Athanasius. Now, Athanasius lived he was actually there at Nicaea. He was only a priest, so he couldn't participate, but he was there at Nicaea with his bishop, Alexander. And later, he actually tells us what these mean, what these words mean. Go for it, read it.
And hypostasis is ousia, and it means nothing else except very being itself, which Jeremiah calls existence, in saying, "And they heard not the voice of existence." The hypostasis and the ousia thus mean hyparxis, existence. It is namely and exists.
So we're not hearing anything different than what I've already said, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
He's
Athanasius is
saying,
confirming.
yeah, you're confirming what you guys are calling this, but it's
He,
not. The
the
hypostasis and
problem
the ousia thus mean hyparxis, existence. It is namely and exists.
the problem Athanasius believed they were a single hypostasis. All right. And we're going to get there.
Oh boy.
Now, this is Origen.
All right.
And Origen, he's kind of using these words. He's actually trying to, explain how they are separate, how they're independent. And what does Origen say about the hypostasis and the ousia of the Son and the Father?
Sabellians do not allow him, if we examine them farther, any independent hypostasis, nor are they clear about his ousia. I do not mean that they confuse its qualities, but the fact of his having an ousia of his own. For no one can understand how that which is said to be word can be a son, and such an animated word, not being a separate entity from the Father, and accordingly as it, having no hypostasis, is not a son. Or if he is a son, let him say that God the Word is a separate being, and has an ousia of his own. Has a
So,
mind of his own.
so before this is before Nicaea. This is about 250 A.D. And they're teaching here. Origen is teaching that they have their own ousia, their own hypostases. They are separate beings. They have separate existences. They have separate minds. That separate I ams. They're two Yahwehs in heaven. This is what he's teaching before. Um, they. So I went through the scripture. They were teaching that there were two gods in heaven. Okay, two
Yes.
gods. There were two Yahwehs in Genesis 19 verse 24. We have multiple verifications of this throughout the early Christian church. Justin Martyr specifically quoted Genesis 19:24 when he was talking to Trypho the Jew. Trypho the Jew was a Jewish. He believed in strict monotheism. He did not believe that Jesus Christ would come as the Son of God. Justin was using his own Bible against him and saying, "Look at Genesis 19:24. There are two Yahwehs there. What does that say?" So what does this first one say here?
I shall attempt to persuade you, since you have understood the scriptures, of the truth of what I say, that there is and that there is said to be another God and Lord subject to the maker of all things, the Father. The Lord and
Very good.
creator of all things. Again, this is the Father alone, whom we have thought right to call God, since he made the second God visible and sensible. Sorry, I did both. Oops.
That's fine. So that was Lactantius, who basically they believed that the Creator was the Father and the Father alone. If you read the Apostles' Creed, it says, "I believe in the Father, the Creator of all things." That's what it says. They believed that the Father was the Creator, and that He used the Son to create all things, as like a architect would a builder, a contractor, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the architect doesn't go out and build houses or buildings or skyscrapers. The architect goes and hires somebody to do that for him. So that's what they believed, is they believed that the Father was the architect. He was the creator of all things, and he used Jesus as the contractor, as the builder.
The maker.
Yep. We see that they believed in two gods, in these two Yahwehs in heaven, these two powers in heaven. So go ahead and read the last one.
And thus the firstborn of all creation, who is the first to be with God and to attract himself divinity, is a being of more exalted rank than the other gods beside him, of whom God is the God, as it is written, the God of gods.
All right. So we see that not only did they believe in this idea that there were two gods, but there were also many gods, the Elohim. The Elohim is plural in Hebrew for many gods. It means there are gods up there, and that Yahweh was the God of gods, and so these other gods existed. Now, this sounds like, okay, so they had people come against them, and they said, "Well, you guys are polytheists. You guys believe in more than one God. How does that work?" Not only that, but another. So this is Origen, Origin
Mhm.
was the last comment here, and a lot of people attack Origin because of this. And so I'm going to nail two birds with one stone, because Origin was the most orthodox scholar of his day. Nobody could surpass him. He had bishops following him. He had people coming up and asking questions. He would correct bishops. Now there was a dust up between him and his bishop out of jealousy, but that did not preclude or did not change anything. That Origen was the most um, orthodox and correct scholar of his day. And we see this in the next slide, because there was a council of bishops. And in this council of bishops, it names 5 named bishops, like Dionysius, Maximus, Demetrius, and they were all questioning Bishop Heraclides. Bishop Heraclides they were trying to determine if Heraclides was Orthodox or not, right?
Yeah.
So let's read through this exchange here. And what does Origen say with Heraclides?
Is the Son distinct from the Father? Heracles. Of course. How can he be Son if he is also Father? Well, being distinct from the Father, is the Son himself also God? He himself is also God. And do two gods become a unity? Yes. Do we confess two gods? Yes. The power is one. But as our brethren take offense at the statement that there are two gods, we must formulate the doctrine carefully and show in what sense they are two and in what sense the two are one.
All right. So here's where he nails the polytheist problem, because they are a collective. He actually uses examples like Adam and Eve. When Adam and Eve were two separate individual beings, they became one flesh. They became a single, mono collective, right? Mono meaning one. He talks about believers, how all believers, when he quotes John 17:22, he says that when we believe in Christ, and all believers, we become one with Christ, one, a unity, a collective, that they are all singular. You don't say, there aren't different, he also uses churches. Says that a number of churches, they are all one church. Now, if you are more than one church, you are poly, right?
Yeah.
Poly meaning many. No, he says that you're one church, but you can have all these different churches who are one church because of collectives. He was naming collectives. Now, this wasn't just Origen. Look at the response here. And as Origen explained collectives and explained Adam and Eve, churches, believers, how we are all become one in unity as a collective, what does Maximus say?
May everyone hold the same doctrines as I do. Before God and the church, I give both my signature and make my oath.
So this is Bishop Maximus, who is confirming what Bishop Heraclides says, and Bishop Demetrius and Bishop Dionysius and Bishop, forget this other name, they are all agreeing with this concept here. This isn't just Origen. This is a council of bishops who are discussing this. So this is where, it gets kind of crazy, because Anaxagoras now, let's go back to Anaxagoras and see what he says. So this is heresy to me, but
yeah. All other things partake in a portion of everything. While nous is infinite and self-ruled and is mixed with nothing, but is alone itself by itself, for if it were not by itself, but were mixed with everything else, it would partake in all things if it were mixed with any. For if in everything there is a portion of everything, as has been said by me in what goes before, and the things mixed with it would hinder it, so that it would have power over nothing, in the same way that it is now being alone by itself. For it is the thinnest of all things and the purest, and it has all knowledge about everything and the greatest strength. And Nous has power over all things, both greater and smaller, and that have soul.
All right. Now, he's basically saying here that if you mix the nous mind with matter,
Not having it
then
separated.
not having it separated, okay, then you've got this problem where if you mix anything, then you can't control it. So you've got to stay up here. But your mind has the ability to send forth reason. Now, when we talk about reason, the mind has the ability to, or the nous has the ability to send forth the logos. Logos in Greek means to reason. Jesus was called the Logos. In the beginning, the Logos was with the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. He was the Logos. The Logos means to reason, or what we know of in our Bibles as the Word. So the Logos, the mind sends the Logos, right?
Mm-hmm.
It proceeds from the mind, but they're the same being. Okay.
All
The
right.
mind and the reason are the same being. So this is where we get into the Nicene Creed. When we talk about ousios and homoousios,
Mm-hmm.
homo means same. It doesn't mean
One.
one.
It means
It
same.
means same. Mono means one. Homo means same. Homosexual means same sex. Homogeneous means same stuff. So there's homo means same. Mono means one. Emperor Constantine ordered this. If you would read that.
The insertion of that single word, homoousios, an expression which the emperor himself explained as not indicating corporeal affections or properties, and consequently that the son did not subsist from the father either by division or abscission.
Abscission.
Abscission. For, said he, a nature which is immaterial and incorporeal cannot possibly be subject to any corporeal affection. Hence, our conception of such things can only be in divine and mysterious terms. Such was the philosophical view of the subject taken by our most wise and pious sovereign.
Constantine knew Greek philosophy backwards and forwards. He was trained from his youth. He knew Anaxagoras. He knew Parmenides. He knew Thales. He knew Plato. He knew, he was so well versed in philosophy that when he brought all the bishops together, he taught them his philosophical view and he ordered them to implement it. This right here is 100%, 100 proof positive evidence that an apostasy occurred at Nicaea in 325 AD. It's
Eusebius
just,
is saying Emperor Constantine ordered the insertion of that word.
yes. And the Greek, if you look down below it, the Greek word, it says recommend, but it's also considered orders from a superior officer. And I can tell you right now, Constantine did not think it was a recommendation. He was ordering it because the idea was that if you didn't follow this, if you didn't sign the creed, you were going to be expelled. You were going to be stripped of your stole. You were going to be excommunicated and expelled from his countries and taken away from your church as a bishop. That was an order.
It even still, like, isn't Latin and just the emperors were considered deific, right? So
Yeah, they
that's
were.
why. So when Christianity was being preached and taught to the people there, and a lot of people, would have this Greek understanding of philosophy and this worldview, and that the emperor was also deific and had, if he gave the commands for something, it was to happen. It needed to be. Um, so when Emperor Constantine makes this command, it is literally going to be an order, even though the word says recommend. That's how it was going to be.
Well, it's recommend in one sense, but it is order in another.
It is order in another, but it's coming from Emperor Constantine. He is the superior. He is not making recommendations. He makes demands, and you are to follow them. I've read enough of ancient history and known how people reacted to certain things that, yes, this is not going to be a recommendation at all. This is something that he enacted, and he said this is going to be what's going to happen.
That's right. So now let's take a look at the creed itself. Now this is where it gets really interesting too, because they totally screwed it up. This is the word homoousios in blue, the very first on the right. You see the Greek on. I'm sorry. The Greek is on the left side, right?
Greek on this side, and then way over.
Yeah.
The other way.
That's the Latin. Yeah. No. Wait. Yeah.
Right here, and then way over that side.
We can see the Greek because we know it's Greek because we can't read it. But what it says in the blue, it says homoousion to patre. One being, or the same being as the Father. Same being with the Father. Okay. Now, down below, it actually has, it says ex heteros, hypostasios, or hypostasios, he ousios, okay, which means hetero, different. This is in down here, that's in the anathemas. If you claim that they are of different hypostases or of different ousia, then you're declared a heretic, and you are anathema to the church, and you lose your salvation. All right?
Yeah.
Now, what did they do with the English translation here?
Hypostasis or substance.
Hypostasis, they said hypostasis twice. Substantia, remember, ousia converts into essentia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hypostasis converts into substance or substantia. And we see that in the Latin, because in the Latin, if you look over in the Latin, you see the yellow and blue. Yeah. It says what? It says substantia.
Substantia.
And essentia. Okay. So they got it right in the translation down there in the anathemas. But what does it say up in the Latin where it says homoousios to patre? What does it say in the Latin version?
Unius substantiae.
They changed it to one hypostasis. One hypostasis in the Latin version. And we will see that. This is where it gets like mind-blowing. This is the aftermath of Nicaea. Now, there were two bishops that initially they did not sign the creed. They said, nope, we're not going to sign it at all. And you can go ahead and you can kick us out. And so they were exiled with Arius. Arius wasn't even a bishop. Arius was only a priest, right? He was presbyter. But there were two bishops that said, nope, we are not going to sign this. There were three bishops, at least three bishops later that recanted, and there may have been more, but we know of these three. Go ahead and read that quote there.
Eusebius, Theognius, and Maris repented of having subscribed at all, went to the emperor and said, "We acted impiously, your majesty, in subscribing the heresy from fear of you." Angered, he banished them to Gaul, which is western Galatia, and ordered that Arius and his companions be restored to their own cities.
So this is the aftermath of Nicaea. Everybody thinks, oh yeah, Nicaea, they saved us. Constantine, his um, his kingdom was falling apart because Christians were arguing over the nature of God. And so, everybody says, "Oh yeah, we're saved because Nicaea." It finally, it firmed up the nature of God, and it created this homo. No, it created massive. It backfired on a tremendous scale.
And that was not solving anything by having this Nicaean council.
No, I mean it is absolute proof of apostasy because later Athanasius was excommunicated and exiled at the Council of Tyre in 335 AD. He just 10 years later, but he was restored at this Council of Serdica. Okay, yeah, the Council of Serdica by the majority of the bishops. So, what did Serdica do? This is another bishop. Before we get to Serdica, this is another bishop who was at Nicaea. He signed the creed, right? This is what he says. Go for it.
These then Arians teach three hypostases, just as Valentinius, the Gnostic heresiarch, first invented in the book entitled by him On the Three Natures, for he was first to invent three hypostases and three persons of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and he is discovered to have filched this from Hermes and Plato.
Okay. Now, while this might sound, first of all, he was claiming that it was the Arians who were teaching three hypostases. Now, he's trying to say, the Arian, those guys, those Arians, they're the bad guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is Marcellus of Ancyra, and he was condemned as a Sabellian. He was condemned for modalism by claiming that they were one hypostasis. Now, where did they get this from? This is the synodical letter of the bishops assembled at Sardica. This is a council. Now, this council, there were more bishops that attended Serdica.
Mm-hmm.
There were more representation from Eastern and Western bishops than there were at Nicaea. At Nicaea, there were only 5 Western bishops that attended Nicaea.
And we're saying East and West because this is the period of time when there is an Eastern and Western Empire of Rome, right?
Yes. So there were the Greeks were kind of considered the Eastern, the Latins, they were kind of considered the Western bishops. So the Latin bishops, so there were only 5 Latin bishops, 5 Western bishops that attended Nicaea.
Okay.
And there was only like 312 bishops total. There were more bishops that attended Serdica, and there were more Eastern bishops that attended Serdica. So they had a greater mix. Now, look at what they canonized here. You're not going to hear this from anybody because they're trying to hide this.
They're trying to hide this. The writings of our fellow minister Marcellus were also read and plainly evinced the duplicity of the adherents of Eusebius. For what Marcellus had simply suggested as a point of inquiry, they accused him of professing as a point of faith. The statements which he had made both before and after the inquiry were read, and his faith was proved to be orthodox. They
were saying that Marcellus teaching one hypostasis was the orthodox teaching that they got from Nicaea. They were teaching. Now, again, you got to remember here, Marcellus was condemned as a Sabellianist. He was condemned as a heretic.
Because
they are legally legitimizing his Sabellianism. So go ahead and continue reading here.
Because this is really hard to grasp, right? Because, listen, I'm hearing these words and they're trying to stay in here, but they're also trying to leave at the same time. So
I understand.
When you say Sabellian, he was saying that the solo or the same homo, he was saying homoousios, right?
The Sabellians were saying homoousios. The Sabellians were saying one hypostasis. The Sabellians were the heretics.
Okay.
They were the heretics that the church was trying to condemn.
Okay. And the church was trying to condemn them at Nicaea.
Oh, all throughout, like from Origin, Origin through there was councils in Antioch in the 260s A.D.
Okay.
that
Okay.
condemned homoousius and Sabellianism, and it condemned
As heresy, yes.
as
So
heresy. They were condemning these as heresy.
because
Yeah,
they had
here,
those discussions previously. They're like, we already know this. You guys that believe it that way, that's heresy. That's wrong. So Sabellianism, wrong. And okay, so when Constantine or Emperor, yeah, he says this is going to be included. Does Marcellus deny it, or was he pointing it as an inquiry, as they're reading here?
no. So Marcellus was saying that this is it. This is the correct way,
Okay,
and
okay.
this.
So that's right. Let's actually go. Oh, oop. Let's go back a couple of slides because this is a very important point to make right. Um, was it right here? I don't know if it was right here. Let's see. Sabellians do not allow him an independent hypostasis. Okay, so not having an individual mind per god. Um,
Okay, yeah,
was it all the
you're
way
going
at the
back too far
beginning?
now. No,
I'm too
you're
far.
going back too far. The Sabellians right there. That's it
Okay,
right there.
that's it. That's it. So I do not mean to confuse his qualities. So Origin is saying that the Sabellians, they're wrong, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Where was it that they had the dialogue? Was it right here? I think it was.
Next one.
And next one?
Next one. Right
Okay,
there.
right here, the dialogue. And okay, Maximus. Where's Marcellus?
Marcellus was. This is not Nicaea. Okay.
This is not
This is
Nicaea,
in.
but this is before
This is before
Nicaea.
Nicaea.
All
This is
right.
sometime around 220 through 240 A.D. This is 100 years before Nicaea.
Okay. All right.
So the Sabellians have been around forever, and they are teaching that there is one hypostasis and that there is one ousia, and that they are homoousios. All right, so that's what the Sabellians are teaching. They don't separate their hypostasis or their ousia. They don't separate their existence. They think that they're one existence, that they're one being, or the
Okay.
same being.
All right.
Okay.
And what they're putting out right here is that no, they are separate.
They are separate.
Okay. And so when it comes up to Emperor Constantine, and he has learned in the ways of Greek philosophy, he says, no, we're going to have it be like the Sabellians. And
Right.
all right. And then those who have, so everyone is in an uproar because this was like,
Yes.
no, this, why are you doing this, Emperor? No, that's wrong. Because the Emperor Constantine, he was Western, if I remember correctly, which might not be. I'm going to actually look it up because this is a very important point. Emperor Constantine was the leader of, he's also known as Constantine the Great, so the leader from 272 to 337 AD. No. He was the Roman emperor from 306 to 337. He was born circa 272. I gotta make sure this is right. It says Goths, so I have reason to believe that he was, the Western Empire's political ruler, which
He
also made
was
him, in the terms of Latin origins, he was the divine leader too.
he was the singular emperor over the entire Roman Empire at this point. There was a
Okay.
war, and he around 205 or 305 AD, not long into his emperor, when he became emperor, there was a war. He killed his brother, and he took over the entire Roman Empire. And so he wanted to, since he had politically gained control over the entire empire, he wanted to make the church unified, Eastern and Western Church. So he tried to bring them together, and that's what Nicaea was for, was to say, okay, bishops, you guys are
you're arguing too much.
You're arguing too much. We're going to settle this dispute, and we're going to do this at Nicaea. And so that's
But
what they did.
that was a political way of doing it. It wasn't a divine way of doing it. And because he was the divine leader, according to Latin theologies and philosophies, that was going to be it.
That's right.
No.
So we see that
But
he
only
actually
just caused
brought
more conflict. He actually caused more conflict because of that.
he brought Greek philosophy into the church. This is Greek philosophy, and the bishops recognize this. Most of the bishops recognize this, but
okay. And so
how do you say no to an emperor?
You don't.
You don't
run away. Okay, so the bishops that had they did not agree to this. The bishops initially exiled Secundus of Ptolemy and Theonas of Marmarik, and those who signed and recanted, which was Theogonius, Eusebius, and Maris. So they didn't agree. They said, no, this is not right. We shouldn't have done this. And they said that Sabellianism, which was being politically instituted into the church, was wrong.
Yes.
Okay.
And
so now we can go forward from that and making sure that is
now,
like
hang on.
people's minds.
So now we have Marcellus, who agreed with Nicaea, but he was a Sabellian, right?
Yes.
Marcellus was a Sabellian. He was what part of the heresy, but he agreed with it.
Okay.
And he was convicted as a Sabellian and excommunicated, but he came to this council, and they said, wait, why did you convict him, or why did you excommunicate him? He's right. The Sabellianism is right. It's orthodox. Why did you excommunicate him for him teaching proper doctrine?
The adherents of Eusebius. So they're right here. This is what we read before. I said we have to make sure this is quite clear. That the writings of our fellow minister Marcellus plainly evinced the duplicity of the adherents of Eusebius.
So Eusebius was one of those that went to Emperor Constantine and said, no, this isn't right. Okay?
I shouldn't have done this.
I shouldn't have done this. And so now they're saying, you, Eusebius, you're in the wrong, right? Because we believe them to be one single hypostasis. So as we read, the canon out of here, it says we have been taught, and we hold the Catholic and apostolic tradition and faith and confession, which we teach from Nicaea, that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost have one hypostasis. One hypostasis. Now, remember, you have this nebulous mind up here, this nebulous God.
No understanding whatsoever that we can
we can't understand him. And he's the mind, and he sends forth his reason. He sends forth his word, but it's still the same mind. It's the same being. So, when you look at the words, it says that I and my Father are one. They think that it says we are one hypostasis. We are one being, one existence, one voice. That is apostasy. No. That is apostasy. Mind blown yet?
You've melted. Well, not quite melted. I mean, you inflated it again. My brain is still up because I'm pretty invested. And once we started talking about like the political leadership of, who instituted what and where it was and when, I was like, oh yeah, this is what I love. Ancient history.
Yeah. I know. So there's a lot to go through here, but
there is so much here. There is so much here. It's a gold mine.
When we understand that this is called the Trinitarian shield, and this is what a lot of Trinitarians will point to and say, this is how God is. That the Father is not the Son and is not the Holy Spirit. They're not each other. They're all three separate persons, but they are They're all God. You know, the Father is God, the Son is God, the Holy Spirit is God. So they're all pointing to God, right? But they're not each other. But these persons are not beings. They're not. We don't understand them to be, you know, to have their own mind, their own will, their own, you know, the thing that makes them a being, a thinking. You know, I think,
therefore I am.
I am.
Well,
right? So the Son doesn't have his own thoughts. The Holy Spirit doesn't have his own thoughts. It's God that has the thoughts. This nous mind that has the thoughts, the will.
Yeah.
And what do you call somebody? What do you call a person that
Psychopath.
that does not have their own will? That's not a being. What do you call a person that's not a being? I call them a character.
A character? Because here's what's coming to my mind. All right, this is what is coming to my mind: insanity. When you start hearing things that are not your own.
So
that's what comes to mind. This is insanity. No, please stop. This is insane. Because I am me. I think I am because of that. Okay. Well, if you take it too far, which is what they've obviously done here, I am insane. Because I cannot have more than me inside of me.
Well, actually, we'll get to that. So if you think about this, there's a couple of things that the next, this works.
Oh, no.
Okay. I am Legion. Or we are many.
No.
Demon 1 is not Demon 2, is not Demon 3, but they're all Legion, right? They're all Legion. So basically, they're saying God is possessed in some way, except that there's a problem with this. Demon 1 has his own thoughts, his own mind, and his own will. Demon 2 has his own thoughts, his own mind, and his own will. They're all Legion, but they are separate beings inside of a being.
Yep.
Okay. Well, what if they aren't actually, if God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, if they're not their own being, if they are just a person and not their own being, I call that a movie character. If we were to say Santa Claus is a person, right?
Yeah.
Darth Vader is a person. Darth Vader doesn't have his own thoughts, though. He's a person, but he's not his own being. He's a character. He's a movie character. Harry Potter is a book character and a movie character, but they're characters. They're not. They are persons without being. Now this is modalism. So what happens is you can't be the actor is the one who plays the characters. He plays Darth Vader, plays Santa Claus, plays Harry Potter. I remember, growing up, I was the actor and I played Santa Claus, right? When I played Santa Claus, I wasn't me. I was Santa Claus. So when you're the actor and you're playing somebody, then that person has the same existence, the same being as the actor. That's me. When I was playing Santa Claus was me. I was the same being. So a person without being is a character. A person without being is nothing more than a role the actor plays. Now in modalism, this is called modalism. Modalism says the actor can only play one character at a time. And then he has to go back behind the stage and he has to change costumes, and then he can go and he can play Santa Claus, for one scene, and then he can go back behind stage and he can change clothes and he can come back and he can play Darth Vader for another scene and he can go back behind stage. And so you can only play one role at a time.
Yeah.
Well,
but that doesn't make sense if he's playing both roles at once.
So we know of times and places where Jesus prays to his Father. How does he pray to himself? You have both of them in the scene at the same time. You have scenes where the Father comes down and visits him during his baptism. You have the Father leaving Jesus while he's on the cross. He left Jesus while he was on the cross and said, and Jesus responds and says, Father, why have you forsaken me? My God, why have you forsaken me? And then when Jesus dies, or as soon as his very last words were, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit.
Individual.
My spirit. His individual spirit. He's got his own spirit. He's got his own will, because in the Garden of Eden, or in the Garden of Gethsemane, he says, not my will, but thy will be done. So he's got his own separate will. He's got his own separate spirit, who he is. He's got his own separate being.
He's not directing it at some entity above him. He's directing it to the Father.
That's right.
Who he's aligned with.
So this is where the Trinity fails, is because these characters, Jesus is his own being. So modalism says you can only do it one at a time. However, there is a situation where the single actor can play all of them at the same time.
Wow.
We are living in a sock
show.
puppet play.
I mean, like earlier, when I was doing the dialogue, I was talking about the dialogue. I mean, I was acting as two persons, but I still had to separate which one was which. But a sock puppet play, sure, yeah, that makes sense on how you could.
So the sock puppet can pray to the invisible Father behind the scenes. He's the narrator. So this is the Trinity. This is exactly what the Trinity is. The Trinity is nothing more than an actor. We are basically living in a matrix type, where God is the programmer, and he sends his avatar into the world as Jesus Christ. And yeah, you can see where this is the Trinity.
This has been thousands of years.
Fails. The Trinity fails. You can put a big fail on the screen there. Fail, because that's what the Trinity does. It fails on a massive scale when you understand it. But that's why they play these words. Three persons in the same being, and the person isn't a being. They have to get around it because they've been taught this.
Because the language doesn't work. We went through the language, and we went through the political statements that were instituted to people back then, and they were told they were wrong because someone in power wanted something.
This is 100% evidence of apostasy. We have Joseph Smith, who was able to repair the damage that was done, because now we know that they are separate beings in heaven. They are two separate Yahwehs, two separate gods, who are one in unity, one in purpose. They have their own minds, they have their own wills, they have their own existences, but they are both divine beings, divine nature. And this is one of the primary reasons that I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because it is the only thing that can make sense of this madness.
It is madness. I said so. It is literally insanity.
And your eyes are being opened, and I hope that the people who view this will see that as well. So I just want to bear my testimony. I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
And hope that you will join us in future episodes. Join us next week. We'll be talking about things that are upcoming. We'll be talking about science and abiogenesis. We'll be talking about which is the natural origin of man, how atheists believe that we were naturally created. We'll be talking about Mesoamerican history and how it compares with the Book of Mormon, and how the Book of Mormon is true because of Mesoamerican history. So we've got a lot of good things coming up in the next few weeks. So looking forward to
it.
I'm excited
because there's plenty I've heard and am ready for. Oh, it's great.
All
I'll see
right.
you, everyone. Thanks for coming, and let's have a blessed week. Catch you next Thursday.